It is almost overwhelming. Thank you, students, for being here. You are the best student government I've ever worked with. You're fantastic. I appreciate you so much. Thank you to the faculty for coming out. You're my people. I'm a faculty member at heart. For those of you who don't know, I'm a history professor, and leaving the classroom was probably the single most painful thing I've ever done when I went into administration, because I really loved teaching. Thank you, staff, for being here. Thank you, board members. Thank you, community members, alumni. But most of all, I want to thank my family and friends for making the trip and being out here for this day. Thank you, Matt and Michelle. Thank you, Mike and Maxine in the back. Thank you to my father and my in-laws, to my sons for making this trip, to my brothers, the other two Shrock boys. That's not a joke. We still are known as the Shrock boys. You're Jim's boy, right? Yeah, I'm Jim's boy. I'm 56 years old, but sure, Jim's boy. But most of all, I want to thank my spouse, Kelly Shrock, for supporting me through all of the craziness that we have done and moving all over the country. As we've gone through this program, I just keep thinking to myself, I'd really like to meet this Joel Shrock guy. He sounds great. At this point, I'm usually required to talk profoundly and to talk deeply about higher education. I might actually go a different direction. As you get to know me, I wanted to talk a little bit about myself. But we're going to be talking today about being strongly rooted and still growing and what that means. To me, this is a powerful metaphor that focuses on how our values, traditions, and past affect our present and future as we grow into something different for a new season. Our roots must be strong and well-developed in order for our new growth to branch out in different directions. Our future will not be our past, but that future is firmly connected to what has gone before to shape us. I am a historian, so my natural inclination is to examine and explore how our past influences and creates our present. At this point in my life, I have been a historian longer than I was not a historian. It is impossible for me to look at anything without looking at it through my professional lens, much to the annoyance of everyone. Human beings, we are the products of our past. People are the product of their interactions with other people, places, institutions, and values. I am no different. I have roots, and my roots have determined who I am. So we are going to start with a little bit about who I am. We're going to do this quickly, sort of Eminem style. These are some of the things I love. I love a good sense of humor. I do think I am funny. I love sarcasm. Not everyone agrees that I am funny. Just ask my wife or Michelle. I love college basketball, good defense, the three-point line, and the shot clock. I love democracy. I love music of all kinds, but I really love punk. I'm a person of strong opinions on many things, just ask me. History, sports, books, movies, television. But I firmly believe art is personal and people have the right to love the art they love. I come from a family where none of us have ever been wrong. I believe love is better than hate, and I believe in the words of Jesus Christ that the greatest commandment is to love your God above all others and to love your neighbors as yourself. I believe most people want to be good. Faith and family are important to me. I love history. I love teaching in college. I love working with students, and I love working at a university. I firmly believe my spouse is the perfect match for me. I believe I have the best sons in the world. They are kind, good people. I am lucky to have been born to my parents. I am lucky to have the siblings that I have. We are Shrocks. That's not always good. Good manners are important. I love barbecue. I love to fish. I love donuts. I love literature. I love the novels of Jim Butcher, and not as a guilty pleasure. I think they're really good. I love Lord of the Rings. I waited my whole life for the movies, and I'm still stunned that other people like them. I don't understand that. I believe humility is better than pretentiousness, but I say that realizing my vocabulary is sometimes pretentious. I love spending time with my friends. I love laughing with them. I think euchre is the best card game of all. Ted Lasso is good for the soul. And I try to be a good person, but acknowledge that I will never be as nice as my brother Jason or Deb Skinner. Things I don't like: liver, tofu, shellfish, black licorice, butter pecan ice cream, the most disappointing flavor, cauliflower, country music, except for Shabuzi, Phase 10, it's a terrible game, pretentious novels, the late 80s Detroit Pistons, except for Isaiah Thomas, the New England Patriots, every single one of them, the new NFL kickoff rule, The Office, boxing movies, Poor Things, it's an overrated movie, Game of Thrones, it's okay, historical TV shows. But there is a broad array of things that I have no opinion on. This might surprise you. Curtains, bedspreads, pillows. I just don't care. And if you think I'm kidding, just ask my wife, what's your opinion on this pillow? Yeah. What do you want? I don't like gossip. I don't care who's dating who. Please don't ask me to set people up on dates. I will not participate. I feel like I'm an empathetic person. I care about you, but if you need a hug, do not come to me. If your last name's Shrock, I make exceptions if we're related. But seriously, there are good-natured souls out there who will hug you, probably Deb Skinner. I dislike zealots of all stripes. I do not like extremists. In the wise words of Obi-Wan Kenobi, only the Sith deal in absolutes. So what has produced this personality disorder that I have? I am a product of my past, just as we all are. And as you've seen from the videos, I did grow up in rural northeastern Indiana. Outside of a small town, I didn't even grow up in town. We lived at Skinner Lake in rural Noble County, about 5 miles from my maternal grandparents, where I spent a lot of time doing every imaginable task. They had 10 acres of asparagus, so we grew up picking asparagus. I'm not kidding. We were little picker children. We picked up rocks from fields, cleared ditches, ran chainsaws, drove a truck when we were way too young. We did things like, and my brother's here, he can corroborate this story. We are using galvanized buckets to paint some sort of terrible herbicide on a stump for a mulberry tree, which, if you know mulberry trees, they sort of grow like dandelions along fence rows. And my grandfather's going by in his tractor, and he actually stops and turns it off, and he looks at my brother James and I and says, "Hey, boys, don't get that on your skin. The government banned it a few years ago." And we honestly stopped with our paintbrushes, a galvanized bucket, and we just looked at one another and just kept painting the stump. What are you going to do? I grew up surrounded by family and friends. We fished, played sports. I went to a small Lutheran church. It was something of a bucolic experience and existence. I learned a lot of lessons from my growing up, from my grandparents' parents, my father, Jim Shrock, my mom, Judy Shrock, who could not be here tonight. From my father, I learned that we should support our community and our neighbors. My dad was the superintendent of our school district, and every kid that came to our door, he bought something. A tub of cheese, wrapping paper, it didn't matter. He always bought something. And one time I just looked at him and went, "Why do we buy all of this junk? How many tubs of cheese do we need?" And he just looked at me and he said this very seriously: "If we don't support our community, who will?" And he probably doesn't know this, but that stuck with me. That was a lesson that never went away. So every kid that has ever come to my door, I buy something. And Kelly one time asked me, "Why do you buy all this junk we don't need?" And I said, "Because if we don't support our community, who will? If we don't support our schools, who will? If we don't support our neighbors, who will?" That's an important lesson. Even when we had almost no money in graduate school, I'm buying a candy bar from the kid who comes to the door. From my mother, I learned empathy and that we can embrace people different than us. My mother has lived in Albion, Indiana her whole life, it's twice as big as Lamoni, and it has a stoplight. But in 1961 and 1962, my mom lived in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and she went to design school. And I was talking to her when I was older, when I was a historian, and she said, yeah, I lived with my roommate, and she described her, and she said, yeah, it was kind of hard. We had to sort of live in an in-between section of town. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She said, well, she was African-American. And so we had to live in a part of town that allowed African-Americans and whites to live together. And her brother wouldn't pick us up there because he was too afraid to go into that part of town. And I'm like, Mom, in the middle of the freedom rides, in the civil rights movement, beatings, fire hoses, arrests, murders, you chose to live with an African-American woman in 1961 and 1962. And she said, yeah. Why, is that weird? I'm like, yeah. That's a significant moment in history. You're making a significant social statement. She said, I just liked her. And for me, this was a remarkable example of how someone who grew up in a completely white community, through empathy and understanding and reciprocity, could just change. It's also a good lesson that your parents do amazing things that you never realize until you ask. For my maternal grandparents, more, and for my father, I learned hard work. We worked many hours on that farm, and we learned about the pleasures of a job well done. And there were a lot of many jobs there. My grandfather would stop and say, hey, how's college looking, Joel? And I'd say, yeah, it's looking pretty good, as I picked up the 100th rock from a field. Yeah, pretty good. You probably didn't know if you've never done it, but rocks work their way up in fields, and you have to pick them up by hand. There is no automatic rock picker-upper. For my dad, I also learned hard work. It's something that we all learned, my brothers. If a job takes 12 hours, it takes 12 hours. My wife has named this. We Shrock it. She's like, look, you don't need to Shrock this. You can actually take a break. And I'm like, no, I'm almost done. 2 more hours and we'll get this thing knocked out. We all have this trait. Sometimes it's a bit self-destructive, but one thing is true. We get things done. I have 3 siblings. I've mentioned that. We learned many things with 3 siblings. First, in the Shrock household, fairness. There is no such thing. Sometimes one kid gets something, sometimes another gets them. Deal with it. Life's not fair. We're moving on. Desserts. When they're gone, they're out. There is no one more cookie, so you better get there. There is no such thing as me time when there are 4 kids, 2 parents, and a multitude of local relatives, but I did discover I like to read, and no one really bothers you when you're reading a book in the corner. Compromise is not a virtue, it's a necessity. In the age before streaming television, when you're fighting over the remote control, these things are vital. And I learned for myself, family is a vital support network. But the things that have impacted me, in addition to my upbringing, is my training. It left an indelible mark on me. As a historian, you learn a lot of lessons that stick with you. Human beings are amazing and terrifying. We have created philosophy and art and engineering marvels. We've gone to the moon and back. But we have also mastered bigotry and war and genocide. Shakespeare was right in Hamlet. What a piece of work is man, how noble in reason, how infinite in faculties in form, and how moving, how express and admirable in action like an angel, in apprehension how like a god. But we know Hamlet was ironic because his uncle had murdered his father and married his mom. It's a horrifying moment. If I have accomplished anything in my life, it's because I have stood on the shoulders of others who taught me how to study, how universities work. In my undergraduate years, it was Dr. Richard Aquila, who you heard from today. It was Dr. Tony Edmonds. It was Dr. John Barber. It was Dr. Drew Caton. In graduate school, I went to Miami University in Ohio, where Dr. Mary Fredrickson got me interested in gender issues, where the late Dr. Drew Caton showed me what it meant to be an exceptional lecturer. He was a spellbinding orator. He wrote brilliant books, but he was the most kind, humble person I have ever seen in our profession, which is filled with overinflated, overweening egos. He was not that person. I was his teaching assistant, and I'm not going to lie, I wanted to be him. But it was actually his spouse, Dr. Mary Kupiec Caton, who spoke this evening, who had the most profound impact on me. Mary was my dissertation advisor. She's one of the most intelligent people I know. She's the master of the seminar. She pushed me. She cajoled me. She drove me a little crazy rewriting my first chapter. Graduate school, as many of you know, is the last bastion of a patronage system, and a good advisor can get you through, and a bad advisor can make your life exceptionally difficult. Mary Caton was the best possible advisor. I had somebody on my committee who I went to talk to them about my defense, and this person was having a bad day, so that rolled on to me. This person yelled at me for 59 minutes, and I know because there was a clock right behind that person. So afterwards, I thought, okay, wow, that didn't go very well. I was just trying to schedule my defense, so I went up and I was talking to Mary in her office. She said, what happened? So I told her, and she said, oh, no, it's okay, I'll take care of it. To this day, I do not know what she did. I have no idea what she said to that person, but that person signed off on my dissertation asking me for no rewrites. I don't know what kinds of threats she levied, what kind of guilt she laid on. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. I have been lucky to have had fantastic colleagues who I've learned a great deal from. Probably the most profound for me was the late Dr. Eric Henderson, who, when I was a young faculty member at Great Basin College in Nevada, we team taught together. He taught me the business side of how universities operated. He was a proto pain-in-the-rear faculty member, but he was really smart. And the president out there was so good. He always listened to what Eric had to say because he really was one of the smartest people in the room. And I learned a great deal from Eric, and he was the best person I've ever worked with team teaching. It was the best experience of my life. So I am the product of my roots, of my past. Graceland University is also the product of a strongly rooted past. But Graceland is poised to adapt and change in the 21st century. We are at a point in the history of higher education where the industry is in turmoil. We have to approach education differently sometimes. There is a paradigm shift happening. No one knows where it's going. Consultants try to tell us they know. They don't know. So how are we going to not only survive, but to thrive in this climate? First, remember, this is not the first time higher education has been in difficult times. Sometimes we forget this. In the 20th century alone, Spanish influenza, World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, pandemics and economic downturns and global war are not new to Graceland. It is true that higher education is viewed less positively now than at any time in the last 70 years. Yet those of us in higher education know that some of these accusations are foolish. We know students grow and progress. We see how freshmen start and how they end as seniors. If you don't believe me, pick a paper from any freshman and then read what they write when they're seniors. There's a profound transformation that occurs. Data backs up this analysis about the importance of higher education. If we look just at dollars, men with only a high school diploma in 1973 made on average, adjusted for inflation, $58,000 a year. In 2023, men with only a high school diploma made $45,000. But that's still far below the $77,000 median annual income for young male college grads and below the $65,000 median income for young women with college degrees. Yeah, we got a little ways to go. Young college grads have roughly quadruple the wealth of their less educated counterparts. Now, I'm not arguing that there aren't problems with the student loan system. There are. But I'd like to put this a little bit into context. If you think about the average price of a new car, in 2024, the average price of a new car is $48,397. The average student loan debt in 2024 is $40,681. In 1989, the average cost of a new car was $15,750. The average student loan debt in 1989 was $13,074. The cost of a college education in 1989 was 83% of the cost of a new car. The cost of an education with the loan debt in 2024 is 84% the cost of a new car. I guess I just need to ask, is your college education worth the cost of a new car? Why do we complain about the cost of college education, but we don't complain about the cost of a brand new F-150? We should complain about the cost of a brand new F-150. The reality is that American life is more expensive now than it was 40 years ago. But our priorities have also shifted. And I would challenge us to rethink those priorities. But we live in difficult times. My favorite quote about living and surviving difficult times, actually, and this won't surprise anybody, comes from The Lord of the Rings. But if you remember, or maybe you don't know, Professor J.R.R. Tolkien fought in World War I. He was at the Battle of the Somme. Just look it up. It was bad. 1 million casualties. An entire generation of men were dead by this time in Europe. Machine guns, tanks, artillery, poison gas. Tolkien saw all the horrors of war. So when he wrote The Lord of the Rings, and one of his characters asks, "I wish it need not to have happened in my time." And another responds, "So do I. And so do all who live in such times." But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. That is what we have to decide. What will we do with the time that is given us? How do we respond? We are strongly rooted and still growing. Second, we cannot be afraid to change and try new things. Or maybe even go back to older things. In the age of ChatGPT, I'd be very tempted to run back to the Blue Book. The Blue Book is a technology from the 1850s. Bound books of paper that you have people write essays on in class. Yeah, it's an ancient technology. Hard to use ChatGPT with a Blue Book. But where will we go? What will we become? What I know is that Graceland's commitment to liberal arts, its values of openness and radical belonging, will see us through these changes, through what's on the horizon. We cannot fear change or failure. I'm going to quote some more literature here just because it's my speech. In Frank Herbert's Dune, there's a fantastic little speech that the Bene Gesserits give about fear. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. When the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. Fear cannot stop us from doing what we need to do. Fear cannot stop us from trying to figure out how to solve these problems. In fact, failure is often necessary in order to succeed. There's a great quote from Roger Federer. He said, "I've failed 46% of every point I ever played. I only won 54% of my points." He's one of the greatest tennis players in history. Had he won 4% fewer of his points over his lifetime, he would have been just a normal tennis player. The difference between greatness and average was 4%. 4. Over a career. We cannot be afraid of failure. You have to get back up and swing at the ball. My plan for Graceland has 3 prongs. I've talked about them often. I think I'll say them again. I want to create a strong student experience. I want to make Graceland a great place to work, and we need to drive revenue. None of these goals will be accomplished easily or without change. None of them will be accomplished without transformation. To prosper into this century, we're going to need to move forward boldly. We cannot be afraid to make mistakes or to change our minds. As Emerson said, a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, adored by little statements and philosophers and divines. That's a shout out to you, Mary. We are strongly rooted and still growing. Third, we must remember that what we're doing is worthwhile. We live in a world of ChatGPT, large language models, artificial intelligence, misinformation, political polarization. But the world needs universities. The world needs higher education. The world needs liberal arts. The world needs this university. The first university in the Western world was the University of Bologna in 1088. Graceland is a part of this long tradition, 1,000 years of education. We were founded as a non-sectarian Christian institution where everyone was welcome, and it has been so since 1895. We've been accredited for 100 years. All that is gold does not glitter, not all who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither, deep roots are not reached by the frost. It's Walt Whitman. I'm lying, it's not Walt Whitman. That's also from Lord of the Rings. The key is in the last line, which I love. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. Graceland has deep roots, very deep roots, that are untouched by the frost. We embrace radical belonging. We're a place where everyone can come and thrive. This does not mean Graceland has been untroubled by problems or will not be troubled by more problems. But it has elected to invite everyone to our table. Graceland is a diverse community of students, faculty, and staff. We provide an affordable education at an incredible value. We teach students to look beyond themselves. We self-consciously attempt to create transformational leaders, empowered to serve a world to make it a better place. Regardless of place of birth, race, gender, ethnicity, Graceland provides an education that broadens the mind, develops leadership, and embraces the spirit of education. This fights against narrow parochialism, jingoism, and ignorance. It breeds understanding, reciprocity, cosmopolitanism, and intelligence. Colleges do not have a monopoly on learning or on any of these traits. But Graceland is a place where students can learn them in a systematic way, supported by empathetic professors and staff to give it meaning, to give it shape, where they can learn to ask questions and find new answers. We are 2 campuses and 1 site. We have undergraduate programs, we have graduate programs, we have adult programs, we have in-person, we have online, we have hybrid. But we are not a factory. We don't make things. We don't make widgets. We help people transform into better versions of themselves. We don't even get to do it to them. We have to do it with students. If a student doesn't engage in our learning community, we are almost powerless. They have to engage. We provide the opportunity for them to engage in our learning community, but they have to take the opportunity. And most importantly, remember, Graceland's mission, which is our transcendent reason for existing, is not just about teaching students professional soft skills. The university is not just about teaching specific discipline skills. It's not just about providing a transformative co-curricular experience. Graceland's mission is far grander, more far-reaching. This university creates learning communities where students develop their potential for meaningful and productive lives. Graceland's purpose is not just to educate someone fully so that you're a good human being, though we do that. Its purpose is not to help you develop soft skills for your first job, though we do that. Graceland's purpose is not just to help you have a robust co-curricular experience, though we do that. We are in the business of producing people who will go out and change the world. That's our business. We're not talking about money alone. We're talking about things that matter: wholeness, community, grace, generosity, the worth of people, peace, unity and diversity. We are trying to change the world one student at a time. And my goal is to ensure Graceland fulfills its mission for another 120 years. Thank you so very much.